Hello students and welcome back to another video. My name is Aaron and I will be giving you a very brief 10-minute overview of Photoshop. So keep in mind we won't be able to cover everything in Photoshop, but we'll cover quite a bit of ground. And then below in the show notes on this Canvas module, we have additional material and resources and explanations to help you further your interest in Photoshop, answer any questions, etc. So let's get started. Let's start by opening Photoshop. And when we open Photoshop, we'll see a few things, and I'll give you a quick lay of the land. We have our files here, which are linked to Adobe Cloud. Up here, we have Home. If we click that, we're already on the home screen. And then to the right, we have our advertisements, which will always be placed there, showing you new features, etc. Down below, we have our recent files. And then to our left, we can open a file or start a new one. And in addition, we have a few other widgets up here. I'll just cover this one briefly. This is your profile picture, and if you click that, it'll take you to Adobe's website, and you can further investigate your account and different features. Let's move into new file, and let's experiment on how we set up that file. So there's a few components here I would like to go over. So this is called our new document screen, and within it, we have our presets listed up here. To the right, we can create a new preset if we wish, and I recommend doing that so you have more control and understand each component that goes into that. So let's create our own. So I'm going to call this artwork for DOVAD, and then below, you know what, let's make it 13 by 13 inches. And artboard right here, that'll create a little white background for us, so let's make sure that's clicked. And then resolution, we won't get into the details about resolution, but keep in mind 300 is more than enough. 72 is basic for web, but 300 is more than enough. So you're always safe with 300, but just keep in mind this will drastically increase your file size. So tread with caution and do your research. Down below, we have our different color modes. I have RGB selected, which is used for digital art. CMYK is best practice for print. Down below, we can select our background contents. Typically, I recommend going with white or transparent. And down below, we have our color profile and pixel aspect ratios, and that's really more advanced items. We won't get into those, but just keep in mind that Photoshop is just so robust that we could just keep going and dissect these layers. So we're going to start with this format that we have here. I want to quickly talk about what this program is based off of. So this program is based off of what we call pixels, which are the tiniest compositions of digital dots on your screen. So if you hear the phrase PPI, that stands for pixels per inch. So Photoshop relies on pixels to communicate items visually, versus Illustrator, which uses vectors, which are lines, shapes, paths, anchor points, etc., that rely on mathematical equations that allow you to infinitely scale those. Here in Photoshop, we will not be permitted to infinitely scale as we're bound to our certain pixels per inch. So if you need to make something that will be printed or shown very large, make sure to plan accordingly and that PPI or pixels per inch is incredibly robust. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get into our workplace settings. So there's a few things I want to cover here. I'd like to cover where our settings are and what they do, manipulating settings, and then the essential settings as well. So on the top, we have our little command or menu bar. And if we go up to Window, we can go down and we can start to click on Workspace. And within Workspace, we can select one that works best for us. For example, I decided to select Essentials, and that is what I'm showing here. If you ever run into a situation where that workspace isn't working, keep in mind you can always come back here and click Reset Essentials. I have further instructions listed below in the show notes on creating your own custom workspace if you wish to do that. Let's dig into layers on the Layers panel and understand how that works a little better. So right here, I'm going to move that up so we can see it a little better, but I have what I'm calling our layer 1. So I'm going to call this test 1. And if I click that, for example, I can go into my brush tool and I can draw. So that is a little smiley face guy. We always want to make sure a layer is selected before we start drawing. So let me change my color here. And you can see how that blue is covering the red because it's on top of it. So that is a really brief overview of how those layers are working. Keep in mind we can also move them and adjust them, and this is shown down below in the show notes with further explanation and detail. And then right here I have everything bound to one artboard. So do you remember how we clicked artboard when we started the project and set it up? That's what this does. That's not entirely required, but it keeps things organized if that's something you wish to do. We also have a feature called folders. So if we create a folder or group, we can start to group items that are similar and keep us a bit more organized. For example, I'm going to call this folder of line work. And I can drag and drop those items within the folder, and you'll see they tab over just a tish, and that's how I know that they're within the folder. So that is a very brief overview. Just a few other items. We have create a new layer down here below, and then our layers panel is here next to channels and paths. Let's move forward and investigate a few tools. So I will not cover all the tools here. There's a further explanation down below in the show notes, but I will hit the big ones that are most important to get you up and running in Photoshop. So we have a wide array of what we call selection tools. The basic one that we have here is called our marquee tool. In our marquee tool, the rectangular marquee tool will create squares and rectangles of selected space. And for example, if you want to hit B for brush, you can color in that space and it's limited just to that rectangular space that you indicated. Then if I go up here and I click move, I can start to adjust that area and move it around my artboard. And I can even rotate it a bit, really have fun with it, even use portions here that start to flip it. I just hit done when I'm done. And we have similar tools down here below. Our magic wand tool and our lasso tool will function very similar, so make sure to play around with those. This is our crop tool, which will change the size of our artboard in the background. And here, we don't often use this one, but this is our frame tool. So if I were to draw this out, I could drag and drop an image, and it will fit perfectly into that frame, and it will fill up that space. Our eyedropper tool, if we put that over a certain color or element, it'll give us that color. And if we even double click down here, we can see the different color codes that are associated with that, which I find helpful. Now that we have a very basic elementary understanding of selection tools and move tools, let's go on to a demo file. So here in my demo file, you can see I have my layers organized and labeled. And if I go into this layer here, we can see this is a very messy interior. And let's clean it up and use a few tools. So I'm going to click on that layer, hit the plus, and I'm going to call this interior cleanup. And if I go to my spot healing brush, I can just click over this and I can start to really clean up this whole entire area. So you want to work in small little portions. And this is particularly helpful if you're photographing your work and you find things in the background that you don't want. You can start to hide them by using this technique. And if you see here, I turn this layer on and off, you'll see it flicker on and off with the little eyeball tool. Okay. And then we already used our brush tool, which is located down below. And then our stamp tool functions in a similar way that our healing tool does. To do that, we just need to hit Option click or Alt click on a PC, and that will pick up a certain area that we want to repeat, and we can start to drag that around. I prefer the healing brush tool, but some people like this as well, so make sure to play around. They require a bit of practice to get the hang of. A few other items I want to mention is we have our eraser tool here, a blur tool, and then a few other items including text, zoom, pen, rectangle, and hand. And this hand will allow us to move around. A few important things about this pen tool is that this will allow you to create different lines and change the stroke, fill, etc. So if that's something you wish to do, that tool is available. So those are very basic tools here. We have that rectangle. Most people use this program to adjust existing imagery, but you can definitely create in here. There are tools and equipment to achieve that. We have our foreground color and background color listed down below. And this really is the beginner toolbox that we use. We call it the essentials for a reason. But just to go over briefly what we learned, we have our move tool. Selection tools are always located in groups together. And if we right click on that, we'll have micro options with inner options. So make sure to play around with those. They can be quite complex, so you find out what works best for you and your workflow. Down below that, we have our eyedropper tools, our healing tools, which are located here and here, our brushes, and then a few other editing tools listed down below. And if we click here and right click our edit toolbar, we can start to adjust what we have in this area by clicking and dragging that item over and making sure that it shows up. Let's dig into what we call adjustments. So adjustments simply adjust a layer, brightness, saturation, vibrance, etc. There's a lot of things they do, but I'm going to show you just a quick example on how to do that. So I want to click on my butterfly or select the layer down below. And once I click on that, I'll go up to adjustments here, and I can start to play around with a few things. So I'm going to show you the top 4. I find these most helpful, so make sure to play around and explore. So hue and saturation, we'll change the hue and saturation. You can do a combination or either one. And then once we have that, let's make sure to right click that, and we are going to hit create clipping mask. And if you see that, it creates a little arrow and it clips it to our layer to ensure that that adjustment is not affecting our file globally. So that's very important, so make sure to do that as you're adjusting each layer. A few other adjustments I can do here is let's go in and let's play around with the brightness and contrast. You can see here what that does. We can start to stack different adjustments on top of each other. So one right here, let's go to curves. So within curves, we have our shadows located down here, our highlights here, and then our midtones up here. So you can adjust those as you see fit. And I'm just going to move this curve down here and make sure that it's clipped to my appropriate layer. So I'm going to select my butterfly again, go up to levels. So curves and levels function in a very similar way. Use what works best for you. But here I can adjust my shadows, my midtones, and my highlights. So you can have some quite the funky effects here, so play around with it and experiment. Now that we have that, let me show you a few transformations. So select your layer here, and if you rotate here, that is technically a transformation. And you can also do what's called scaling, which is just increasing the size of the image. And if you hit shift, you can adjust that disproportionately. If I click that and go up further to edit, transform, I can use things like rotate, skew, distort, and we'll do skew for now. And I can start to manipulate that as I see fit. So use those tools if you need to manipulate any settings. And then also down below, I have a little shortcut for you on creating smart objects, and it will make sure that your image is preserved before you go ahead and manipulate those via transformation. So make sure to check that out in the show notes below. And show you a very brief introduction to masking. So if I want to mask an object, essentially knock out a background, what I can do is I can click my image, hit the small mask down below, the button, and then I can use a variety of my selection tools that we covered earlier, and I can just simply select that portion and hit delete. Okay, I can go back and clean elements up if I need to, but it did a pretty good job, and I want to show you what that did. So if I delete my mask and then Control Z, you can see it knocked out my background. And I also applied my transformations. If I want to hide those, I just click the eyeballs and you can see how that is working in tandem, not only with my layer, but also with adjustments and masking. So there's a lot of building on top of each other in this program. In addition, we have a few ways to save our file. So I always recommend going to File, Save As, and saving this as a .psd. So this is a Photoshop file. Beyond that, we have a few other options. So Adobe changed this up in 2021. If we want to save as a more advanced file type, we go to File, Save a Copy, and that'll open up a whole entire door of goodies and options for us to choose from. We can do JPEGs, PNGs, TIFFs, etc. So make sure to check out the show notes down below. I have it in quite detail about what each step was with more screenshots. So if you need anything, go ahead and check that out.